My next guest is Ramesh Ponnuru of National Review to talk about Mitt Romney and the woman's vote. Welcome, Ramesh.
Hey.
So there's been a lot of political commentary lately about Mitt Romney's problems with women voters. But you wrote recently that the gender gap is overblown in your view. How come?
Well, people have this idea when they talk about the gender gap that there's some kind of monolithic women's vote and that women vote based on their sex. And in fact, they don't. They don't vote on their sex any more than men do. There's always going to be a gender gap. Republicans do tend to do better among men than among women, but there's nothing specifically that Romney can do to appeal to women. He needs to improve his numbers across the board.
Well, but aren't there so-called women's issues out there that he could play to? I mean, doesn't abortion play a role in this, and gay marriage and other issues like that? I mean, as you said, Democrats, aren't they more reliant on the women's vote, and don't they generally receive more of the women's vote because they score better among women on these issues?
Well, it's funny. That is a very widespread view, but there isn't a lot of data to back it up. There is plenty of evidence that women have more dovish views on foreign policy than men, going back at least 100 years. There is some evidence that women are more pro-welfare state than men, but when it comes to their views on abortion, there really just isn't any difference. Men and women seem to be pro-life at just about the same rate, and there really isn't evidence that that's what's driving this gap.
Okay, so women are more inclined than men to vote Democratic, but the size of the gender gap doesn't really determine races, as I understand your argument. So Republicans can underperform among women and still win.
Well, look, if women alone decided the election, John Kerry would have won the presidency in 2004. Kerry won the women's vote, but men voted against him at a significantly higher rate, and that delivered the election to George W. Bush. And that's part of the problem with the gender gap conversation that we have, which is that the female strength for the Democrats is balanced by male strength for the Republicans, and yet somehow that never gets factored into the equation.
Okay. What do you think of Romney's decision to break down job losses by gender and make an issue of that?
Well, he made this point that since Obama took office, 92.3% of job losses have been among women, which is this very eye-catching statistic. But I do think in the long run that is going to backfire on the Republicans, because if Romney's president, what is he going to do to make sure that the right percentage of jobs, whatever that's defined as, goes to women? If he decides to cut aid to state and local governments disproportionately employ women, and he's going to have created this idea that that is a valid measure of whether a policy is good or bad. So I think it's just a mistake to play that kind of a quota game.
Hillary Rosen, a Democratic strategist, recently made some comments essentially disparaging Mitt Romney's wife, criticizing her for being a homemaker, I guess is the gist of her remarks. The Democrats really hustled to distance themselves from those remarks, from President Obama on down. What do you read into that response by the Democrats?
Well, I think it was very wise of them that they understood that Hillary Rosen's comments were extremely unhelpful to their cause. And one of the things that I think it highlights is that there are divisions among women that come into play here. There's a difference between, we talk again about the women's vote, but married women vote differently than single women. White women vote differently than black women. And moms who stay at home and see their primary job and their sole job really as homemakers are going to have a different kind of set of attitudes on politics than women who define their lives differently.
So you think Romney should avoid sort of gender-specific appeals because it's identity politics and Republicans shouldn't play that game, or because it's simply not going to help him?
I think both, and it's related, because women who think of themselves as a voting bloc of women are not people who are gettable for a Republican, because they're people who have already made the mental leap into liberalism.